When Pope Pius VII was kidnapped by Napoleon, Napoleon told him, "We will destroy the Catholic Church." The Pope laughed in his face and said, "If we Catholics haven't destroyed the church in 19 centuries, you won't either." So, growing up, one of my favorite bands was The Who, and one of their best songs was "Won't Get Fooled Again." And there's a line in the song that says, "Meet the new boss. He's the same as the old boss." Then there's another line that says, "I'll get down on my knees and pray we don't get fooled again." Now, I would have sang it to you, but the last time I was in Orlando and I tried to sing, they asked me to please sing in a different key, like Key West or Key Largo. And when I tried to sing in Jersey, when I lived in Jersey, they would just tell me to sing tenor 20 blocks away. So I'm not going to sing The Who today. But right now, there's a little schism brewing, and I see it on YouTube. We all see it. And I just want to encourage you guys that these people that are trying to destroy our church from within, they're not going to be able to. Just like Pope Pius VII told Napoleon, if we Catholics didn't destroy it in 19 centuries, you're not going to destroy it either, and neither are these loudmouth YouTubers. But I just want to address it to encourage you and to warn you guys. I have a voice, so I'm hearing all these negative voices, so I just want to be a positive voice. Because to me, and I'm going to show you very clearly, I'm going to introduce you to the new schism, which is the same as the old schism. And I get down on my knees and pray we Catholics don't get fooled again. So, a lot of schisms in the church, but I'm just going to focus on two today. During Vatican I, not Vatican II, during Vatican I, there were a bunch of traditionalists that would not accept Vatican I. They said, "We are not in schism. The Pope and the church is in schism." And they formed a new church, but they said it's not a new church. They said it's the old Catholic Church. So there's actually a denomination in schism with the Catholic Church called the Old Catholic Church today. And they have apostolic succession to a point, and I'll explain that in a minute. So their Eucharist is valid. However, the Mass is illicit. It's illegal. It's not a legal Mass according to canon law. It's an illicit Mass. And they argued that this small group was preserving tradition and the church became modern. They were modernists. And just like Luther's protest, no different. Luther said the same thing. He was a Catholic monk, and he said the church is getting away from the tradition of old, which he believed was just Bible alone. So he came up with this doctrine that no one ever heard before, Bible alone. And he said he ain't leaving the Catholic Church. They excommunicated me. I didn't leave. I'm going to fix the church. And that's what all the reformers, and even I still get some classical Protestants today that understand classical Protestantism, Luther and Calvin and those guys. And they'll tell me they're Catholic. They're just protesting what the Catholic Church changed when we became modernists. But I want to focus on the old Catholics, the old Catholic schism, which is probably like 1 million strong. And then in 1980, in the 80s, I guess, or the 70s, Marcel Lefebvre, another Catholic dude, excommunicated by the church because, like Luther, his pride made him think he knew better than all the bishops and the church and God Almighty, who gave the authority to the church. He knew better, and Vatican II was wrong. And he was going to hold on tradition, and so he started his little group, SSPX, I guess named after St. Pius X, I think, I'm guessing. And they said they're going to hold on to tradition. And just like the old Catholics that I just mentioned, Their Eucharist is valid because they have apostolic succession, but their Mass also is illicit. Now, the New Schism, which is the same as the Old Schism, has a bunch of apologists on YouTube that are really smart apologists. They really know how to convince people. And one guy, Taylor Marshall, and you know, I don't play games. I tell it like it is. I'll tell you the people's names. A lot of guys are afraid to give names. You know, I don't know why, but Taylor Marshall, he'll say he's not in schism, but he'll talk like a schismatic. He'll have schismatics on. He'll sound like an apologist for SSPX. He'll continuously bash the new Mass that 90% of us Catholics go to, continually bash the Holy Father to the point where he puts on his Instagram, I think it was, a question: who believes the Holy Father, who believes Pope Francis is the valid Pope? And the majority couldn't say yes, the majority. So you would think he'd be like, oh no, guys, oh wow, he would be on his knees repenting. He says nothing. And his folks will say, oh no, he always says not to leave the church. And I see the analogy like this, you know, here's this guy always telling us, his followers, not us, telling his followers how horrible the new Mass is, how horrible this Pope is, how horrible Vatican II is, but says, but don't leave the church. That's like the dude sees an adulterous woman. She's up rubbing on him. He's like, no, adultery's a sin. Get away from me. She's kissing his neck, blowing in his ears, rubbing his shoulder. He's like, no, adultery's wrong. No. What you do with an adulterous harlot is what Joseph did with Potiphar's wife. You push her away and you run. You run. And that's what you do with schism. You don't play with schism. You run from schism because schism is a harlot. Schism is an adulterous harlot. You don't play around and flirt with adulterous harlots, and you don't flirt with schism the way Taylor Marshall, Kennedy Hall, and all these other guys that are leading people away from the church. And I know they're leading people away from the church because people email me, and I have several friends that are on YouTube that tell me the same thing. They get emails of people left the church because of guys like Marshall and Kennedy Hall. So what's going to happen to SXPS? Eventually it's going to be like the old Catholic Church 100 years from now. This is going to be some small group of people, you know, the majority of the church looks at like, what's up? And they'll become liberal, you know, they will become liberal because all Protestants become liberal. I just made a video earlier this week about why Protestantism always leads to liberalism. And when you protest the church, when you protest the Pope, you are a Protestant, you are a Protestant, and you always become liberal. Even these traditional old Catholic church, Google it. Most of them today accept same-sex marriage. Just like the Lutherans, they're broken up and there's probably like 20 different Lutheran denominations. There's probably a dozen or 20 old Catholics too. They always break up because schism leads to schism. It always does. So just like most of the Lutherans ordain women, most of these old Catholic churches ordain women. You know, just like most of the Lutherans accept same-sex marriage, most of these old Catholic traditionalists that were fighting the modernists accept same-sex marriage. And the new schism of the SSPX is going to go the same way. You say, no. Well, listen, when the sex abuse scandal was at its height in the 50s and 60s, it wasn't the new Mass that caused it. Statistics, FBI statistics, church statistics show us the child abuse scandal was caused by homosexual priests, and it was at its height in the 50s and 60s. Started coming down a little bit in the 70s, and then came down dramatically in the 80s, except for the SSPX, which had an explosion of child abuse. And it is a fact. You can Google Church Militant, has several videos on this. They give the facts, they give the whistleblowers. Whistleblower priest said Lefebvre knew about several child abuse homosexualities. In fact, he was fond of these homosexuals. Now, I'm not saying Marcel Lefebvre was gay, you know, but, you know, I've worked in Disney. I worked with a lot of gay people. I wouldn't say I was fond of any of them. I wouldn't call them I'm just saying, he promoted one gay priest who was convicted of child abuse. he actually told the people that were running the school that this priest was going to watch him like a hawk. He likes kids. Marcel Lefebvre covered for the sexual abuse. You know what? And if you want to compare your father to my father, you know, nobody will accuse my father of being gay. He was a bouncer back in the day. Pope Francis was a bouncer. He doesn't have a hint of femininity. That's how he cleaned up the church, because he could say with authority, because he didn't have a hint of femininity, he could go to the Italian bishops and say, don't allow any homosexual priests in the seminary. Even if they say they're not, if they have a hint of femininity, don't allow them in. Marcel Lefebvre was promoting people, guys, that were flamboyantly gay. So you want to compare fathers, I'll compare my father to your father any day. So what's the result? The result was SXPX had a huge sexual scandal in the 80s, and they still have stuff going on today. What was the result? Well, the result was in Pope Francis's Vatican II church in 2022, there was only six allegations of priest child abuse. And compare that with the city of Chicago, where 3,000 school teachers have allegations of child abuse, legitimate allegations that are being investigated. So, again, Marcel Lefebvre was quiet about that abuse. They covered it up. Even a lot of traditionalists left the SSPX, and they're still traditionalists, because at that time they were amazed. You know, we're traditionalists. We're against, you know, homo priests. Why are they covering this up? Because if you study Romans 1, homosexuality comes out of rebellion. You're rebelling against God. You're rebelling against who he made you. Rebelliousness, and homosexuality goes hand in hand. So there's no doubt in my mind, the SPX, this new schism, is going to be just like the old schism. And eventually they'll allow gay priests and ordained women. Maybe it'll be 50 years before that happens, but it's going that way. Protestantism always leads to liberalism. You know, and a lot of these guys, they do it, you know, they're not coming out and say they're SSPX. They're doing it sneakily. They're promoting, they're saying everything the SSPX says, but they're not saying they're SSPX. I think some of them are true believers. They have that pride of Luther, you know, where they think they're right and the whole church is wrong, the Pope is wrong, and all the popes are wrong. But I think some are grifters, you know. When I was talking this week about Protestant leading to liberalism, I had mentioned Pastor Rick Warren, who ordained 3 women. And I totally disagree with that. I said, but this is what Bible alone leads to. When you reject the authority of the Pope and the magisterium of the church, this Protestant leads to liberalism every time. But you'll know someone by their fruit. I believe Rick Warren is a godly man. He just made a really bad mistake. I don't think his intentions were bad. In fact, when Rick Warren had his best-selling book, The Purpose-Driven Life, when you have a best-selling book, whether you're a Catholic or a Protestant, you make millions. You can become filthy rich. He did a reverse tithe, and he's been doing it to this day, like 10 years, giving 90% of his money to the poor. And when he went to the poor and in Africa to you know, helping AIDS, giving all his money, 90% of his money, and he still said, giving 91 bestseller. So think about some of these guys that have like 5, 6 bestsellers, and they're still on YouTube asking for Patreon donations, just saying. But Rick Warren stopped taking a salary from his church. He says, look, I got all this money coming in, gave 90% of his away, still gives 90% of it away, and he says he still lives better than he's ever lived financially. But Rick Warren, seen up close and personal how Pope Francis loved the poor. And Rick Warren actually said, out of any Christian on the planet today, Pope Francis is the best Christian example that I've ever seen. This is a Protestant. And he also said, Catholics, you should go home to your Catholic church. This is a Protestant. So I just want to get that because I didn't want people to think I was bashing Rick Warren, even though I disagreed with him on ordaining women. But getting back to schismatics, run from schism like you would run from a harlot woman. You know, and you say, well, how do I know if they're schismatics? Well, if they call the Pope a heretic, they might be a schismatic. If they call the Pope an anti-Pope, they might be a schismatic. If they tell you not to go to a new mass, that you should die before you take the body and blood of Christ at a Novus Order Mass, it might be a schismatic. You know, I'm no theologian, but I think I could tell a schismatic. So I just want to close with this. Since SSPX loves St. Pius X, I got a quote from St. Pius X, and a lot of them actually even like Pope Benedict. So I got a quote from Pope Benedict. So St. Pius X in 1912 said it's a necessity for the church to love the Pope and to obey the Pope. And he went on to say he's grieved when this does not happen. And then he quoted St. John Bosco. And he said, you know, St. John Bosco encouraged his collaborators and the young boys he helped to always preserve in their hearts 3 white loaves: the Eucharist, Our Lady, and the Pope. And when I was a Protestant, if you were to ask me the key differences of what I believed and what you Catholics believe, I would say it was our belief on the Eucharist, on Mary, and the Pope. And what are these Protestants who are calling themselves Old Catholics or SSP Catholics doing? Attacking the Pope. And then these schismatics that don't have the guts to say they're schismatic, attacking the Pope. And then Pope Benedict in 2006 said this: do not be afraid to build your life on the church. And with the church, you are all proud of the love you have for Peter, for the church entrusted to him. Do not be fooled by those who want to play Christ against the church. Don't get fooled again. If I could quote Roger Daltrey one more time. Those who want to play Christ against the church, listen to that. There is one foundation on which it is worthwhile to build a house. This foundation is Christ. There is only one rock on which it is worthwhile to place everything. This rock is the one to whom Christ said, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. Young people, you know well the rock of our times. Accordingly, do not forget that neither that Peter who is watching or gathering from the window of God the Father, nor this Peter who is now standing in front of you, the Pope, Pope Benedict, nor any successive Peter, Pope Francis, will ever be opposed to you or the building of a lasting house on the rock. Indeed, he will offer his heart and his hands to help you construct a life on Christ with Christ. Whether you disagree with the Pope or not, you have to believe that he is not here to harm you. He's here to help you, build you up. Everything he's doing is to build up the church. And sometimes we don't understand it till after. So God bless and stay Catholic. And if you are Catholic, please, if you're buying or selling real estate, go to realestateforlife.org and give your commission you're going to pay anyway to a pro-life Catholic company. God bless and stay Catholic.